ArtMakers was made possible by the San Luis Obispo County Office of Education, Studios on the Park in Paso Robles, and the Arts Collaborative.
Hi, I'm Jessamyn Lynn. I'm an artist, musician, and teacher, and I'm here with ArtMakers at Studios on the Park in Paso Robles, and I'm surrounded by beautiful artwork, and it's inspiring me to introduce to you the artwork of Georgia O'Keeffe. What do you see in this painting? Maybe you see waves of warm colors bursting upward, or perhaps it looks like hot flames in a fire. If you look closer, this painting reveals the tender stems, lush petals, and velvety texture of a canna lily. Here's a photo of a canna lily. When they are placed together like this, you can see how similar the painting is to the flower, but it is not exact. It's a representation of what this flower looks like up close. Georgia O'Keeffe loved to paint extreme close-ups of flowers. She painted flowers much larger than life so that people would take notice and experience them the same way she did. She is also known for painting skyscrapers, New Mexico landscapes, and bones. Today we will create a painting inspired by her works and style. But first, let's learn more about Georgia O'Keeffe, the celebrated American artist known as the mother of American modernism. Georgia O'Keeffe was born in 1887 on a farm in Wisconsin. Even as a child, Georgia wanted to be an artist, and her mother encouraged her to take art lessons. Growing up on a farm, nature was all around, and these influences would be reflected in her life's work. As a young woman, O'Keeffe studied art in Chicago and New York. Her teachers trained her in the tradition of painters such as Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo, and Rembrandt. They were masters of a painting style that celebrated realism. In this painting, you can see her talent for using the techniques of realism. Although she enjoyed learning to paint in the realism style, O'Keeffe yearned to create using her own artistic viewpoint. And that's what she did. Through study and exploration, she created a style that was uniquely her own. In 1912, she took an art class that introduced her to ideas of Arthur Wesley Dow. He taught that instead of copying nature realistically, individuals should create art through elements of the composition, such as line, shapes, and color. He felt that art should also be a means of self-expression. This training freed O'Keeffe to think about art differently, and she began to develop a style that expressed her feelings and ideas. You can see her newly found independence in a series of charcoal drawings. In drawing 13, bold strokes of charcoal remind us of nature through abstract forms. Abstract art does not try to show the world in a realistic way. It uses shapes, lines, and colors in unusual ways to express ideas and emotions. In her drawing, the meandering lines on the right suggest a river, 4 round objects in the center suggest rolling hills, and the jagged lines look like mountaintops or perhaps lightning. At this point in O'Keeffe's artistic journey, she abandons realism for the creative possibilities of abstraction. These drawings were later exhibited at a gallery in New York called 291. This gallery was owned by Alfred Stieglitz, a famous photographer and art dealer. The problem was he did not have permission to show her work, and when she found out, she was very upset with him. When the dust settled, O'Keeffe discovered that they shared a love for art. They became friends and later married. Even though they had a rocky start, the exhibition was very successful, and Stieglitz introduced O'Keeffe to the art world. It was new for a woman to paint in abstraction using lines, shapes, colors, and the rhythms of nature to capture her internal feelings. This artistic style became known as American modernism. Modernist painters shared a desire to challenge the realist traditions that dominated art education at the time. O'Keeffe's painting, Red and Orange Streak, features lightning. It is an abstract because it doesn't look like a real storm. It was O'Keeffe's way of capturing what she sees and feels during a lightning storm.
The whole thing lit up, first in one place, then in another, with flashes of lightning. Sometimes the lightning had a sharp, bright zigzag flashing across. I sat on the fence for a long time, just looking at the lightning.
Petunia No. 2 is one of O'Keeffe's first large-scale renderings of a flower. It launched a theme that would mark her career. In this painting, she magnifies the flower's form to emphasize its shape and color.
Nobody really sees a flower. Really, it's so small, we haven't time. And to see takes time. So I said to myself, I'll paint what I see, what the flower is to me, but I'll paint it big, and they'll be surprised into taking time to look at it.
Though American and European artists had experimented with abstraction for at least a decade, O'Keeffe focused on images from nature, and she was the only artist to consistently use flowers as a motif or theme. While some of her paintings are highly detailed, in others, she stripped away elements to focus on shape and color. The radiator building at night illustrates O'Keeffe's skill in shaping architectural structures. Notice how she contrasts the bright lights on top of the building against the dark night sky. She plays with the straight lines of the buildings and the rippling flow of the smoke. When we place her painting next to a photo, you can see how she is using the style of abstraction. Her paintings captured the towering buildings that were changing the skyline of New York City.
One can't paint New York as it is, but rather as it is felt.
Alongside her flowers and buildings, O'Keeffe was also famous for depicting landscapes and other elements from the American Southwest. She traveled to New Mexico every summer to get away from the busy big city and study the quiet vastness of desert skies and rustic, barren landscapes. She discovered animal bones and skulls on her hikes, and they would play a feature role in many of her paintings.
When I found the beautiful white bones on the desert, I picked them up and took them home. I've used these things to say what it is to me, the wideness and the wonder of the world as I live in it.
Just as with the flowers, she looked closely at bones and captured the stillness of them, while at the same time expressing a sense of beauty that lies within the desert. Goat's Horn with Red shows how she transformed an animal horn shape into a colorful abstraction with an emphasis on form and line. In this photo, O'Keeffe is holding a painting in progress. The form of a bone is just suggested. It becomes a frame to see another element. Rather than signifying death, O'Keeffe said that the bones symbolized the eternal beauty of the desert. Later, she painted fanciful canvases that combined skeletal objects and landscape imagery in the same composition. The results were unique and dreamy. It leads some to think that these works are surreal, which is an art style influenced by the subconscious imagination. O'Keeffe was particularly fond of Pedernal Peak, a mesa near her home. A mesa is a flat-topped hill or mountain. She loved the unusual geological formations, vivid colors, clarity of light, and exotic vegetation found in the desert of New Mexico. Her career, spanning 8 decades, that's 80 years, included subjects ranging from the skyscrapers of New York City to the vegetation and landforms of Hawaii to the mountains and deserts of New Mexico. She was most inspired by organic forms and objects in nature, and most well known for her large-scale and close-up paintings of flowers. Although influenced by other artists and photographers, and herself a leading figure of the American modernist movement, O'Keeffe followed her own artistic vision, choosing to paint her subjects in a way that she expressed her own experience and what she felt about them. welcome back to ArtMakers. We are working on a Georgia O'Keeffe project today, and we're just going to start today's lesson with putting our bodies and brains in a better place for making art. We're just going to take a couple of deep breaths in through our nose, blow it out through a straw like an O, out through your mouth, in through your nose, and then pretend like you're fogging up a mirror with a one more in through your nose, and then sigh it out with an ah. Ah. One more of each. In through your nose, blow it out through a straw, in through your nose, fog it up with a last one in through your nose. Sigh it out with a and just notice where your feet are on the ground. Make sure your shoulders are back and open. And I also like to put on some music when I am about to make some art. Most of the time when I'm making art, I don't like to have music that has any words, because the side of my brain that is the word side of my brain gets a little bit confused and has a harder time making art. But beforehand, I like to move around. So we're going to put on some music and do a little body stretching. So we're going to start with some figure eights. And also, before we make art, it's really helpful to connect the brain hemispheres, the two sides of the brain. So this is also what we do when we are working with our bodies. So shoulders back. And I hope you can see that just you and me, well, that's all. And then another focusing exercise is taking one fist and one star, and then we're going to count backwards from 3, and we're going to switch them. Your brain has to speak to both of your hands in order to switch. So 3, 2, 1, switch. Okay, now one claw, one beak. We're going to switch. 3, 2, 1, switch. 3, 2, 1, switch. 2, 1, switch. Switch. I've been practicing, so it is pretty hard to do. And then just the last one, we could shake it out a little bit. Another one to do is draw figure eights with our thumb in front of our face so that we can literally cross our brain hemispheres with our eyeballs, so that the right side of our brain, the art-making brain, can get connected to the left side or the logical side of our brain. Okay. And then one last one that I like to do is also just listening. So you can listen to my singing bowl. Close your eyes if you feel comfortable. If you have one of these at home or something that you like the sound of, close your eyes, and we're just going to take a deep breath in and listen. Okay, now we can pretend like we're Georgia O'Keeffe. We're gonna feel our emotions and express our ideas. Let's start with our materials. Today I gathered some flowers from the local grocery store. And you can, of course, make your own bouquet or gather something from nature. And I also have some watercolors. I have a couple of different kinds. I just have the school kind, which is totally fine. You can buy these at any local art store, or even I think at the grocery store or a drugstore. Oil pastels, which are pretty similar to crayons, just a little more paint-like. So I'm going to be using those, but if you cannot get any oil pastels, crayons are fine also. And I have a pencil. I've got my paintbrushes. I have several different kinds. I have a round tip one, a square tip one, and then some smaller ones for detail. I have a couple of water jugs, one for cleaning off the brush and one for getting water. And then we're gonna make a viewfinder for our abstraction of our drawing. You could make a larger one if you're drawing something further away, but since I'm using something close to me, I made a small one, and I would suggest that you use some stiffer paper. I'm actually just using some magazine covers for mine. So we'll start by making our viewfinder, and I've tried a couple of different sizes. This one seemed to work pretty well, so I'm gonna go ahead and cut this in half. And then the easiest way is you just fold it in half and then cut along the lines, cut a little rectangle in the middle. If you need to draw on there, I just cut halfway. Make sure you cut on the folded side, or else you're just gonna get two little squares of paper instead of a viewfinder. So this is like, you know, sometimes you see directors being like, what's that gonna look like on the screen? This is our way of thinking, what's this gonna look like on my paper? All right, so now that we have our viewfinder, we're gonna do one more exercise to warm up our brains, and it's called a blind contour drawing, and it's really fun. What it means is I'm going to look at what I'm drawing rather than the object that I'm drawing or the subject that I'm drawing rather than my piece of paper. And you'll see it ends up looking pretty interesting. So you also need a couple of pieces of drawing paper, depending on how many of these you'd like to do. So I'm going to use my pencil, put the things away that I'm not using right now. And I could use my flowers. And mostly we're warming up to draw from observation or to look closely. That's basically what drawing from observation means. So I'm going to look at my hand and I'm going to put my paper over a little bit. And one good way of doing it and making sure that you don't look is turning a bit. And I'm going to make a funny shape with my hand, and then I'm just going to pretend like my eyeballs are a pencil and follow the contour, the outside of my fingers with my eyeballs, but then draw it on my paper. I'm curious what you think is going to happen when I don't look at my drawing. What's your guess? Okay. It looks exactly like my hand, just kidding. So mostly I did it really quickly. We're doing that and we're not talking for a moment and we're just really getting used to looking closely. So we're going to take that and apply it to drawing from observation with our O'Keeffe flowers. Okay, so in order to do a watercolor painting, we also need watercolor paper. It works best if you don't have access to watercolor paper. You can use regular drawing paper, but the water might go through your paper. So Canson is a really nice watercolor paper. Just, go to the store and ask what they suggest and tell them your budget. I got the larger stuff so I could cut them into smaller pieces, and there's actually a rougher side and a smooth side, and I like to use the textured side, so you could probably tell by touching or just by looking that there are some more bumps on one side than the other. So I'm going to take my viewfinder. Do I want to have a straight up and down vertical painting? And this is an example of a horizontal painting that I did, side to side. And so I think I'm going to do a vertical one this time, a tall one. And one good way to do it is you can keep your elbow in one spot so you don't change where your view is. It's pretty easy to oops, I found a different spot. But so just remembering Georgia O'Keeffe, she didn't do normally like a still life with everything in it. She abstracted it by making the object that she was drawing a lot bigger. She blew it up and let you see how she was looking at things. Composition-wise, also, I'm using my colors to see what's interesting, so I want a little bit of yellow in 2 different spots. Closing one of my eyes also seems to help. If I open both of them, I get more information, so I'm going to try to see which eye. For me, my right eye is dominant, so I close my left. You'll notice if you close either or, which one's better. And I want to make sure also that you're touching all 4 sides of your paper because that is what Georgia O'Keeffe did. She took up all of the space. Okay, so I'm going to start in one corner of my paper so that I don't get lost in all of the detail and move my way down. And the best part for me about abstract painting and drawing, because I have also done a lot of study of realistic drawings, is that it doesn't have to be exact. I get to have my own style and I can kind of make some stuff up. Okay, so I'm using lines to make shapes that we will eventually fill in. And I might add some more detail once I start using my oil pastels. Okay, so this is what I have. I don't know that if I saw it that I would say, oh, flowers. But that's the fun part about abstraction. So we are going to add our colors to make it look more like a painting and flowers. Okay, moving on to the oil pastel or crayon section of our painting. We're drawing and painting, just to be clear, but I liked to separate my oil pastels into cool and warm colors and then neutral colors. The cool colors, if you want to think about it, are colors that you can find in the ocean, or things that make you feel cold. The sky or the ocean, and then warm colors are colors that you find in the sun, red, orange, yellow. But I am going to start with some yellow. And I'm going to mostly be doing outlining for my sunflower. And I have more yellows over here. I'm remembering to breathe while I'm working. Okay, I think I have my orange bits in there. And my purple, I'm coming through and making some texture. So texture is the way something feels, or in a painting, it's the way it looks. Like sandpaper has a rough texture. I mean, we're gonna go and feel these guys and see. Yeah, they're kind of paper-like and have hard edges. So I'm going through and not making them very delicate or elegant, but kind of scribble-scrabbly. Okay, I think that's most of the purple. There's a little bit over here that I forgot in my drawing, but I can just come back in with my pastel. And I think I'm gonna add a little bit down here for my composition to make it so that my eye, or the viewer's eye, will move throughout the painting or the drawing instead of just staying in one place static. Add a little green. And I'm going to just add some lines through here. These are the leaves, but I'm just trying to add something a little bit different to my drawing. Okay, I'm going to pause there for now with my oil pastels and start adding some watercolor. So as I said, you could use just the regular school. This one is Prang Professional. I think it's professional student, probably, watercolors. So in the paintings I did before this lesson, as you can see, I actually used this for drawing and painting, but I did some very different colors. I used white pastel, which I find very exciting. We're doing an oil resist, so it's like oil and vinegar. They separate, but I decided to make this very abstract and do different colors than what I see. Some of it, but then I also did use the orange and added some purple up here, so I just played around with it. So here I go. When I am using my watercolors, I like to have two different jars, one to add extra water to my watercolors, and then once I get a color, I use it on my painting. And then if I need a new color, I'm going to rinse it off and then use my paper towel and then go back to the clean water. So this water has a little tint of orange now since I used it. Taking some red, I'm gonna mix it in my palette, go in there, get some orange, and let's see, I'm gonna apply my red onto the orange and yellow parts. Since my paintbrush is still dirty, I'm just going to use my dirty water. And I'm going to just try stuff out. I'm going to see, what does red look like on my green? Ooh, that looks cool. So I'm just making some shapes here, filling in the shapes that I made with my lines. Before I move on, I just wanted to quickly mention, we won't go into it in detail, but there's a lot of cool things you can do with watercolor. And wet on wet, so I can put some wet water down. I just put it down on my paper, and then I go and grab a color, and I put my color on top of the wet, and you'll notice it kind of bleeds or looks like water. I can come in with my paper towel and blot something before it's dry and make some textures. And I can also use my brush dry, so I'd have to dry off my brush, go in and get some paint and see what it looks like when it's not full or saturated with water. And then salt is a cool thing to do. Also, I didn't bring any, but you put some salt on your wet paint, and then the salt, like a sponge, sips up the wet paint, and then it leaves these white marks here. You can also use a Q-tip with some rubbing alcohol, and it will bleach the paint and suck it up as well. And then this is tape, where you can put tape down and then paint on top of it or over it. And when you pull the tape up, it keeps it white. Splattering, I don't think we'll be doing too much today, but that one is fun. I think it's pretty self-explanatory. You saturate your brush and splatter some paint on your painting. And then wet on dry is what we normally do. Just dry paper, wet paint. And this is an example of some of those different techniques that I've used. And then I also I like to kind of draw with my watercolors. So this is just a collage that I had made with a picture of me and my friends. And yeah. So those are just some examples of what is possible. All right, that being said, we will finish our painting. Notice how the pastel shows through. I'm going to add a little more purple and maybe a few more finishing touches, but that's it for me today. Thank you so much for joining us, and I hope you enjoyed learning about Georgia O'Keeffe as much as I did.